I always knew I was the second choice in my family, the backup, the filler, the if we have enough left over child, but nothing could have prepared me for how deep that favoritism ran. Until the week of my wedding. Growing up, my older brother Tyler was the shining star. He was loud, charming, and never failed to win people over. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, bookish, soft-spoken, and always told to wait my turn. Birthdays, school events, even basic milestones were always filtered through the lens of Tyler's spotlight. When he got into college, my parents threw a backyard bash with balloons, catered food, and speeches. When I got accepted into a top design school with a scholarship, I got a pat on the back and a, "That's nice, honey." But I kept my head down and built a life I was proud of. I met Liam during my third year in college. He was kind, sincere, and genuinely saw me. Not just as someone's daughter or sister, but as me. When he proposed, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not just because I was happy, but because someone finally chose me. I told my parents the news, hoping, foolishly, that maybe this would be the moment they'd step up, that they'd be proud, but their reaction was lukewarm at best. My mother barely looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, you're actually going through with that?" My dad blinked twice and asked, "Do you think you can keep it simple? Things are tight right now." I understood, or at least I pretended to. Weddings were expensive and I never expected a huge contribution. But a few weeks later, my illusion shattered. Tyler announced his engagement to his fiancée, Savannah. Yes, the same Savannah who once accidentally spilled red wine on my prom dress and laughed about it. My parents were over the moon. They offered to fund the whole wedding, venue, decor, even the honeymoon. "It's not about favoritism," my mom claimed. "It's just, this is the first wedding in the family. It has to be special." My heart dropped. Apparently, I didn't count as part of the family. Not really. I bit my tongue. Liam offered to cover most of our wedding expenses with savings, and I picked a small but beautiful venue in the countryside. I invited my parents anyway, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd show up. 1 month before our wedding, my mom called. "Sweetie, we can't make it to the ceremony. Tyler and Savannah invited us to join them in the Maldives for a post-wedding honeymoon trip. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience." I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, speechless. They couldn't afford a flight to my wedding, but they were flying first class across the globe for a vacation? When I didn't respond, she added, "We'll send a gift card. Maybe that can help cover some decorations." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the phone until the call ended. That night, I told Liam everything. And that's when we made a decision. One I never thought I'd have the strength to follow through on. I was going to make sure they regretted it, and I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd let my silence, and their own reflection, do the talking. The week of the wedding came quickly. Flowers were delivered, the final dress fitting was flawless, and Liam's mom, who had never treated me like a second-best anything, brought handmade centerpieces she'd been working on in secret for months. Her support, her warmth. It filled a hole I didn't know I had. It made me realize how deeply I'd been starved of that kind of love my entire life. And yet, part of me still watched the door. Even as guests arrived at the chapel, even as Liam stood at the altar in his tailored navy suit with tears in his eyes, even as music filled the room and my bridesmaids adjusted my veil, I kept glancing at the entrance. Maybe they'd come. Maybe they'd changed their mind. They didn't. But someone else did. 5 minutes before I was set to walk down the aisle, a woman in a peach silk blouse and oversized sunglasses burst through the side entrance and hurried toward the coordinator. It was Savannah. Yes, Tyler's Savannah. The same woman my mother had called the perfect addition to the family. But her mascara was smudged, her voice shaky, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to speak to the bride," she told my wedding planner, nearly frantic. "Please, I know she probably hates me, but I need 5 minutes." Confused, I nodded. My bridesmaids exchanged alarmed looks as Savannah stepped into the side room where I was waiting. She didn't sit. She stood awkwardly, clutching a small, shiny envelope in both hands. I know this is the last thing you want to deal with today, but I had to come. I needed to tell you what your parents did." My stomach turned. "Savannah, if you're here to rub it in that they chose your honeymoon over my wedding—" "No," she said, interrupting. "That's not why I'm here. I canceled the trip." I blinked. "You what?" She looked down. "Tyler and I got married 3 weeks ago." "But we had a massive fight 2 nights ago, and in it, he told me everything. About how your parents used your wedding fund to pay for our honeymoon, about how they sold off a savings bond that your grandfather left for you to help cover it." My knees nearly buckled. "A bond?" Savannah nodded. "He said they cashed it out and told him you wouldn't know the difference." Tyler thought it was funny. I didn't. There was a long pause. "I don't know what kind of family I married into," she continued, "but I won't be a part of this. I filed for annulment this morning, and I came here to tell you the truth and give you this." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a receipt and a printed confirmation. Savannah had wired back the full amount of the bond, $22,000. In my name. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "and congratulations." She slipped out before I could say anything. My wedding planner re-entered and asked if I was ready. I stood there, stunned. Everything I thought I knew had just shifted beneath my feet. As I walked down the aisle moments later, I didn't look at the door. I looked at Liam, at his eyes, full of love. I walked forward not as the daughter who was forgotten, not as the girl who was always second. I walked forward as a woman who had finally chosen herself. But the real twist? Cameras were rolling. See, Liam's best friend was a filmmaker, and he'd asked if we wanted to record the ceremony, documentary style. I said yes. What I didn't expect was that Liam had arranged for it to be live-streamed too, something we hadn't told my family. They didn't RSVP, after all, but someone must have clicked the link, because just as the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, my phone, left on a nearby table, buzzed violently. Missed calls from my mom, my dad, even Tyler. They were watching from their ocean view suite in Bali, and the look on their faces frozen in the little FaceTime thumbnail that popped up midstream when I finally glanced at the screen. It was everything. They looked pale, shocked, like their entire carefully curated image had been shattered in a matter of seconds, because here I was, beautiful, radiant, loved, and being celebrated without them. Because here I was, standing tall, without needing their approval. Because here I was, married and surrounded by a family that chose me. They thought they'd buried me in silence. Instead, I bloomed in it. Weeks passed after the wedding, and I didn't reach out. No calls, no texts, just silence. At first, I assumed they'd continue pretending nothing happened, like they always did, but silence has a way of echoing louder than shouting, and this time they couldn't ignore it. The first message came from my mother. "We didn't think you'd be so upset. We were overwhelmed. Financial stress, your brother's timing. It wasn't personal." It was full of vague justifications and not a single apology. Then my father wrote a cold 2-sentence email. "Congrats on your wedding. Hope it works out." No warmth, no love, just distance. I ignored them both. 3 weeks later, I received an unmarked envelope with 3 old family photos. Birthday parties, school plays, family vacations. In every photo, the part with me in it had been cut out, deliberate, symbolic. It hit me then. This wasn't just about the wedding. This was about being erased, again and again, over a lifetime. But I didn't cry, because by then, I had already moved forward. The wedding photos Liam and I framed showed a new family. Friends who had stood by me, his parents who welcomed me like their own, and the love we built on truth, not obligation. That hallway was lined with real smiles. No one cropped out. I didn't send a dramatic reply. I didn't confront them. Instead, I used Savannah's returned bond money to start a scholarship, the Invisible Daughter Fund, for girls like me, left behind by the very people who were supposed to lift them up. The story was picked up by a local paper. Then it spread online. Donations came in. So did messages from other forgotten daughters. And then, One last letter arrived, handwritten, from Tyler. He wrote, "I didn't realize how far they went. I thought you were just being dramatic back then. I was wrong. I'm sorry." It ended with, "I hope one day you'll let me be your brother again." I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I had finally stopped waiting for validation from those who only saw me when it was convenient. For the first time, I had built something without their help. They tuned into the scholarship launch event live stream. I knew they were watching. I didn't need revenge, just truth. When they saw me standing on that stage, confident, proud, loved, they finally understood what they'd lost. And I didn't need to say a word. My silence said everything. Because in the end, I didn't need to be included in their story. I had written my own, and it was louder than anything they could have imagined.